Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Coscia, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Well, as usual, I suggest you get a pencil and paper and keep it handy during this talk, just so you can make some notes if necessary. I'm very happy to tell you that I'm really glad that last week we talked about the numbers. God uses numbers sometimes, like Morse code, to speak with us, to give us signs and clues. We're talking about coincidence miracles, so quite often we see coincidences by what time it is. When we look at the clock, it might just change to 4:44 as we look. And I was talking about last week the number 666, which is in the Bible. And since the Bible in the book of Revelation mentions that the number for the devil is 666, well, that tells us a lot. It tells us that the authors of the Bible, they knew what numbers meant. They knew what 666 meant, and they also knew that their readers also knew at that time, 2,000 years ago, that their readers, the listeners, knew that 666 was the number for the devil. And I stressed last week that when you see the number 666, don't always assume it's associated with evil, because if you're the 666th person in line, or you get a check from your boss that's for $666, that's just because the numbers came out to be those numbers. So I was stressing that last week because I didn't want anyone to get paranoid if they saw 666 on their mailbox or their license plate, that they get paranoid and think that God is trying to tell them that they're evil people, or if you see it on your neighbor's mailbox, etc. So don't assume when you see 3 6s, unless you talk to the author, unless you talk to God about it, don't assume that God is trying to tell you something about evil. Now, the reason I'm glad I did that last week is because when I had finished recording that talk, one of the things I did after that was I went for a walk and was pondering what to make the next talk, the talk we're recording today. And so in order to do that, I decided to listen again to the talk that I recorded for last week in week 12. And so I heard over again the talk, as you may remember, and you can listen to it again too. And I'll tell you how to get to those older prior talks later. But you can also listen to it. So I was listening to the older talk and getting ready for this talk. And after I listened to it, I know I was stressing very much, don't get worried about and don't get paranoid about the number 666 and all the other numbers. When you see a series of 3, they all are holy numbers like 555, 777, etc. And I thought, maybe I stressed too much. Maybe I spent too much time on that 666. So I was, giving myself some self-criticism, and I was praying and talking to God. So he inspired me with some things like, over 50 years, I've met a lot of people who do get paranoid about that number. So it's good that I did all I could in the last recording to give everybody peace of mind. And I was finished with my prayer time, and I felt inspired by God that it was time to leave now and go work on some other projects for the day. So I got in my car and left the park area, and I got to the first stop sign. And the first stop sign, a car pulls up in front of me, and its license plate number was 666. And I chuckled a little bit, and I talked to Jesus about it, and he's a very good friend, so he joked with me too, and he said, yeah, it's a good thing you just listened to that old tape that said, don't worry about when you see 3 6s, because otherwise you'd be concerned. And that was a pretty cute instance. And so when I got to my office later, I checked my Facebook and my LinkedIn messages because, I published 2 books, and I get a lot of people's comments about that on those 2 social medias. And so I checked LinkedIn, and my eyes coincidentally just glanced over, and I saw that my followers, my friends on LinkedIn, had just changed on this day from what they were yesterday, and I don't know, we picked up about 15 or so, maybe more friends, but the total number of people following now was 666. So after walking around and praying with God and thinking I overdid it on 666, once again, Jesus inspired me and said, really a good thing you stressed that. You don't have to think about evil things. Otherwise, you'd say, gee, I must be evil because I have 666 people following me at this moment. And so I thought again, Jesus being a good friend, I thought, wow, he inspired me to listen to that tape a little while ago, and he knew that license plate was going to show up at the stop sign before I got to my office, and he knew that I was going to see the 666 on LinkedIn, so I started to see how he was prepping this whole day. So I shared this with a friend of mine later in the day. I shared about, I got a little bit unnerved when I saw that I had 666 people tracking me. And I was relating it to him, and he responded with an email, because I emailed him my story, and he responded and he said, just before you contacted me, Tony, I had just finished reading a book, and I had gotten to page 666 in that book today, and I thought, golly, that's the number for evil, because I remember your lectures on numbers, Tony. And I thought, golly, I wonder if I should read this. And he said, an interesting thing happened. I read the page 666, and the author was explaining on that page how we don't need to worry about evil because we can overcome it when we have faith in God, and God is our friend. Certainly evil can't overcome us if God is our friend, and we're doing what God tells us to do, as you've explained in your book. And so he was astounded that he also, on the day that I was having all these mysterious appearances of 666, that he also had gotten to a book on that particular day, a little while before I contacted him, and he had a similar experience. And in his case, the number 666 was doing a good thing because the author of that book was explaining how not to worry about evil and how to overcome evil. So I share all this with you because last week I explained about numbers and listened to the talk after it was finalized before I prepared this talk. And I wanted to show you that all of these coincidences produced by God, that I was listening to the tape, that the car arrives with the 3 6s, that the LinkedIn followers that are following me comes to 666. A friend of mine just reads on that day, so that you can see how marvelous coincidence clues and coincidence miracles are. I don't know how anybody in my condition who had that all happen to them at the end of the day wouldn't notice that God was involved and that they were experiencing coincidence miracles. So that's why I'm sharing that with you today, so you can see where and how and why I talk about coincidence miracles. Well, I think you'll find the next miracle story is a cute story. It's entertaining, and I hope you do smile a little bit. But I want to hasten to add that it's a miracle story, and a miracle story involves God's involvement. So in that sense, it's a holy event as well. You know, God is holy and he's perfect, but he becomes your best friend. And after 50 years, sometimes he jokes around with me and he makes me smile. And I thought you might appreciate one of those kinds of stories. So please, though, notice that it's still a miracle story. And also notice that the reason I'm sure it's a miracle story is because throughout the whole event, I was talking to God and asking God what to do. And that's an assurance that it's a miracle. It becomes a miracle story at the end. If you're asking God what to do all day and you're doing what he's telling you all day, then you're having miracles because you're doing what he says. And you know, in Moses' case, he told Moses to part the waters. And so at the end of that day, Moses had a miracle parting the waters. So anyway, let me begin this entertaining story. It's called My Miracle Toolbox. And what has happened over the last 40 years or so is I have this pretty good size toolbox, and when I'm working on projects, I'll have screws or nuts left over, and I just throw them in the box. And, you know, maybe 2 years later, I'm working on another project, and I need a screw or a nut or a bolt, and I go fishing through the toolbox. And for the last 40 years, I've been miraculously finding the things I need when I need them. And so that's why I call it my miracle toolbox. After 40 years of events like this, I have to tell you, sometimes I just say to myself, well, I need a screw, or I need 2 nuts, or I need 2 nails. Let me go to my miracle toolbox. And I don't remember what I've thrown in there. But very often I find exactly precisely what I need. So on this particular day, which was recently, I needed 2 nails to nail something out on the porch. And they had to be a certain size. So I went to my miracle toolbox, and I'm fishing through all this debris at the bottom of the box. And sure enough, I come up with 2 nails, but one of them looked like it was the right size. The other one looked like it wasn't. So I went outside, and I started to nail them overhead at the edge of the porch. And I nailed the first nail, but unfortunately, the other nail fell out of my hand, and it fell down into the lawn at the end of the porch. And thank God I looked where it landed, so I hastened around down the stairs and around the side, and I looked exactly where I dropped it. And there I looked for a long, long time. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm embarrassed. I probably spent 10 minutes looking and moving the blades of grass, and I couldn't find it. And suddenly I noticed there was a different nail there, and the nail that was there was all rusted, but it was the exact size. And I know that no one has worked out there on this porch for the last 10 years. So that particular nail was sitting there for 10 years, and it's rusty. But it was exactly where I dropped the other one, the one that I couldn't find. And so what the miracle so far is, I found the other nail to be the exact size I needed. It was the exact size of the one I already just nailed in. And I found the nail that I had dropped. I also found that bounced about 3 feet away. And so this is a miracle story of me finding the exact nail I needed, but not in my miracle box on this day. I found it where the other one had dropped. And all of this I attribute to God, because he told me to go where I had dropped the first one, and he told me to fish around and notice that 3 feet away was where the other one was. So if you talk to God all day long, then you experience miracles like this, that he takes you step by step and causes and creates each miracle. And I've been doing this for 50 years. I encourage everyone to do it that way. God bless you all. And I'll talk to you next week.